To open the day, we'll first hear from David Peaty, Chief Executive Officer of the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. David was appointed in his role in 2017 following a 33-year career in a number of technical, commercial and senior management positions in the oil and gas industry, including a final role as head of BP Russia. David was also appointed patron of Women in Nuclear UK in 2020 and supports their work in improving gender balance in the nuclear industry. Following on from this, we will hear from David Boath, Chair of the ECITB Nuclear Sector, Vice President of Jacobs Nuclear Business and the NSSG Theme Lead for Nuclear Sector Transferability. David will introduce us to the transferability theme, giving us an overview on what it hopes to achieve in order to support the commitments of the nuclear sector deal. This will then lead us in today's panel session for this morning, exploring unusual journeys into and within the nuclear sector. So please sit back, relax and enjoy as David and David introduce us to day two.
Good morning. It's a great honour to be asked to address you today and to say a few words to kick off the second day of the Skills Festival. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David Peaty, Chief Executive of the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. And today I'm speaking with two different hats on. One as the NDA CEO, showing our organisational support for the NSSG, the wider skills agenda in the nuclear industry. But it's also my great honour to be the patron of Women in Nuclear UK. And I'm delighted to see them co-sponsoring this week's Skills Festival, particularly as it sends a clear message that diversity and inclusion are a vital part of our shared mission to build a workforce with the right skills for the future. I was very pleased to be asked to open today's session, which has the theme of skills transferability. I thought it was particularly apt as I'm someone who spent most of my career in another industry before joining the nuclear world. We in the nuclear industry have a highly complex mission, and fulfilling this will require many different tools. People are our most important resource, and we need the right people. Diversity in our people will help us get our mission done right. We're very much in this for the long haul. We need to make sure we put in place today the right framework to ensure we have the skills for our future needs. Many of the things we do require very specialist skills, but there is so much we can learn from outside our industry. We need to have the right mix of supporting skills development among current nuclear workers, as well as encouraging those from other industries to join us and bring their skills. Making it easier to transfer skills in our industry enables us to recruit from a much wider pool. People from outside the industry can bring their experience of best practice, as well as the potential for us to improve gender and other types of diversity in our workforce. The 2018 sector deal between government and the industry has set us a real challenge, a 40% female workforce by 2030. Make no mistake, this will indeed be challenging, but these targets should be ambitious. Otherwise, what is the point? We need to use all the tools at our disposal as we work towards this. For us in the NDA, we also have a statutory duty under the Energy Act to provide socio-economic support to the communities close to our sites, many of which can be in quite deprived areas. And developing transferable skills is one way of making a real impact in this field. Supporting well-paid, skilled jobs in these local areas benefit the wider community too. As I mentioned at the beginning, I personally have experience of transferring into the nuclear industry from elsewhere. I've spent most of my career in the oil and gas industry, starting as a petroleum engineer in a very technical role before eventually transitioning into more commercial and managerial positions. I felt the benefits of transferability myself, building skills and experience by spending time in different technical and non-technical roles, as well as working many different countries around the world. That international experience helped my development a great deal. Seeing many different ways of doing things taught me a lot about diversity and the advantage of always being willing to learn from others. Oil and gas has had similar diversity challenges to our own industry. When I started in oil and gas, there were no women in petroleum engineering. And during my time working on a North Sea oil rig, I had the pleasure of working with the very first female offshore oil engineer. And of course, over my career, things have slowly improved. I've now worked with lots of highly talented women and have seen firsthand organisations that value their contribution of diversity, as well as plenty of examples of poor corporate cultures. So what can be done to improve transferability of skills? Much of it comes down to making changes to bring down barriers. Nuclear is often treated as if it is a very separate and special industry. We need to be showing how much we have in common with other sectors. I believe that we now have a great opportunity to change how we look at brand nuclear. More and more people are values driven in their careers and want to feel like they're making a positive impact on the world. Those on the power generation side of our industry are doing their bit by generating zero carbon electricity to support climate change mitigation, while those of us in decommissioning are playing a vital role in environmental cleanup, dealing with the legacy of the past in order to benefit future generations. And I'm not sure we do enough to emphasise our credentials in this way. We can make more of the theme of global citizenship. In my own experience, there's a great deal of crossover between nuclear and other high hazard industries, and I was able to bring my expertise from oil and gas into this job. The vast majority of our challenges are very similar. We have complex plants, a highly skilled workforce, budgets to manage, and most importantly, a duty to keep our staff, the public, and the natural environment safe. As an industry, we need to be creating a clear vision and show an understanding of the barriers that are currently in place. We should have our senior business leaders leading the way, showing a willingness to compromise when altering systems and processes will provide a better outcome. We need to ensure that our recruitment processes are truly inclusive and that talented candidates are not put off a career in the nuclear industry because they feel excluded at the first stage. The changes due to COVID that we have seen over the last year also provide us with a real opportunity to build back better, if you will. The evidence is now clear that we don't all need to be working from large offices all the time to be productive. We can make positive improvements to enable more flexible and remote working, which will also have a positive effect in expanding our recruitment pools and improving diversity. We can bring the work to the worker instead of the other way around, enabling us to recruit from further afield. More flexible working arrangements will reduce barriers to our roles to those with caring responsibilities, supporting their career development. And we all have a responsibility to make things better. We can all challenge people in a positive way to improve our organisations and the wider industry. Now, in the NDA, we are committed to diversity and inclusion and are clear that diversity of thought is also a key part of this. And one way we can achieve this is through encouraging transferability from other sectors into decommissioning. We've just had our Strategy 4 document approved by the government, and the strategy outlines our ambitions and commitments from 2021 to 2026 and reinforces our commitment to having the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time. We're supporting diversity and inclusion at every part of the career pathway. Our nuclear graduates and apprentice programs have made great strides in their attraction efforts, exceeding the 40% female target in recent years. We've also expanded the roles we recruit graduates for, as well as physicists and engineers. We're now recruiting for roles including HR, communications, and business. At the other end of the career pathway, we've had a number of senior recruitment programs to support the way we've modernized the NDA. We've made a concerted effort in attracting a more diverse range of candidates, and this has proved successful in the appointments we've made. The good news is we're seeing more and more women, particularly in senior roles at the NDA, with now over 20 in these roles in the NDA corporate centre alone. We have very highly talented women running several of our businesses. Gwen Parry-Jones at Magnox, Karen Wheeler at RWM. We're also creating a single waste division to bring together our group-wide waste management expertise, which will be led by Corinne Parr. Some great steps forward, but there's always more to do. And we're committed to mobility within the NDA group as well. As we come together as one NDA, we're really focusing on leveraging our talent across the group and also as part of our longer-term ambitions across the sector, both in the UK and globally. We've been working with the NDA Group businesses to remove barriers for those who want to transfer between businesses, as well as encouraging more people to build experience through secondments to other parts of the NDA Group and beyond. And of course, the NDA and I personally will continue to work closely with the NSSG and WiN UK. I'm very proud to be a member of the Strategic Advisory Group for WiN, and I'm personally supporting their strategic work streams by engaging with other CEOs in the industry and encouraging them to hold themselves accountable for gender diversity in their organisations. So let me finish today with an appeal. In order to make the improvements we need, we really must have open and honest conversations, and those in leadership positions need your help and suggestions. We can't do it alone. So please keep those conversations going and those ideas coming forward. Along with gender balance, I'm in no doubt that transferability supports developing diversity of thought in our organisations. Having diverse people with the right skills in place is the only way we will ensure our vital mission as an industry is carried out. We really owe this much to future generations. Thank you again for inviting me to speak today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Skills Festival week.
Good morning, virtually from a nice sunny day here at Hinkley Point B, one of the fleet of advanced gas-cooled reactors that have been the bedrock of safe nuclear power generation in the UK since the 1970s. I'm David Boath, Chair of the ECITB Nuclear Sector and a VP of Jacobs Nuclear Business. Thanks for joining this session, which will look at the NSSG workstream on transferability that I'm leading, with valuable support from colleagues from many other employers in the sector, and collaborating with key skills bodies such as the National Skills Academy for Nuclear, Cogent and the ECITB. I worked in the nuclear industry for 40 years, covering all parts of the civil and nuclear defence lifecycle in that period, and I'm passionate about securing a sustainable future for the industry and to ensure that those entering our sector can have a fulfilling and successful career. You may well have already picked up on the nuclear sector deal and the key commitments required to drive the future success of our sector. 30% reduction in the cost of new build, 20% reduction in the cost of decommissioning, a more competitive supply chain with UK companies growing their participation in domestic and export markets, innovation-led growth which differentiates the UK's position in the marketplace, and all of which needs to be underpinned by the growth of a highly skilled workforce, which needs to be different to what we have today to drive the industry forward and to achieve the nuclear sector deal commitments. The NIA regularly undertakes a review of the current UK nuclear jobs market, which shows that approximately 60,000 people are directly employed by the industry all across the country, and provides further stimulation of local economies in many areas. The NSSG's Nuclear Workforce Assessment, last published in 2019 and shortly to be updated, shows that there is a significant inflow of new workers required, both to replace retiring staff and for growth under various new build scenarios. However, the nuclear sector is often seen as being specialised, resistant to change, and difficult to enter unless you have the relevant nuclear experience and background. And the theme of today is to try and blow some of these myths apart and to outline opportunities available in the sector through featuring some case studies from those that have successfully transitioned. Whilst my principal activities have been focused on the nuclear sector during my career, this hasn't been in isolation. I've recognised the importance of having an external eye on what is happening in other markets, and I've had strong interactions with other sectors such as conventional power, oil and gas, chemicals, conventional defence, amongst others. One of the advantages of working for a large multi-sector organisation is that it gives you ready access to developments in other sectors, and I've brought many people from different backgrounds into our nuclear projects to challenge conventional ways of thinking and to bring a different perspective to how we do things. Indeed, The nuclear workforce assessment itself recognises that transferability of skills is key to meeting our needs, to bring in diversity of thought and different experiences. But we need to do more to simplify the routes for transferability into our sector and to showcase the attractiveness of the sector and the welcome it offers. It's true that there are some fundamental differences in how we need to operate in the nuclear sector. As the sign says behind me, nuclear safety is our #1 priority. That doesn't mean we need to have a strong focus. That means we need to have a strong focus on issues such as nuclear safety culture, security, and activities that avoid terrorist and proliferation threats. The Nuclear Institute summarises this very well in what's termed the nuclear delta. Once someone has an appreciation of this, then there's no reason why you cannot successfully transition into the sector, and where you can apply your skills and experience into some of the most interesting, exciting and cutting-edge projects around. Yes, there are some specialist technical skills where nuclear technology knowledge is essential, which we call nuclear skills. But this is a relatively small percentage of the overall requirement, with the balance being the application of conventional skill sets such as the traditional engineering disciplines, construction management, chemistry, physics, project management, and the supporting functions such as commercial, finance, HR, applying those into a nuclear context, which we call skills for nuclear. High levels of competence is a key requirement to operate in our sector, and I'm proud that we have developed some of the best technical talent around, which undoubtedly will help you build your own capability and knowledge when you come into the sector. In return, I found that these technical experiences and the surety of approach from the nuclear sector are highly valued when our nuclear staff contribute to non-nuclear projects. So why do we need people to transition into the nuclear sector? Turnover of staff within nuclear is relatively low, and with an adverse age profile and increasing workload, we need new recruits. Some of this will come from early careers, with many of our employers running significant graduate and apprentice training programmes. But this isn't enough. As you'll have picked up from the nuclear sector deal, we need different solutions and more innovative culture and different behaviours to address some of the challenges the sector faces. We've seen greater investment in the last decade or so into other sectors, and some of these are further advanced than us in the adoption of new technologies. So we're in catch-up mode. With our strong focus on nuclear safety and security, we often use that as an excuse not to change how we do things. However, the regulatory regime we have in the UK no longer should be used as a barrier to change. With developments the ONR has introduced to support enabling regulation, and the non-prescriptive approach that we have gives us the ability to justify new approaches to safety justification and obtain licence approvals. Our workstream has already prepared an overall roadmap to look at a wide range of issues we need to address, and we've held a number of collaborative workshops to help us prioritise these. These activities form the NSSG Transferability Action Plan, which is aimed at enabling efficient deployment and transfers, not just into the sector, but also within the nuclear sector. We often don't make it easy for ourselves to be able to move people between different projects, sites and domains within the sector, with different standards applying, all of which adds time and delay to our ability to resource work quickly, none of which helps us meet our sector deal cost reduction targets. The more we can harmonise our approach to this and adopt common standards and solutions, the easier it will be. We've set up a number of transferability working groups to help achieve this. The key items have been identified as induction, security clearances, competency frameworks, and people requirement specifications. The lead organisation and the scope of activities are summarised on this slide. And if you want to get involved on behalf of your employer and contribute to any of these, please get in touch through the NSSG Secretariat and we'll put you in touch with the relevant lead. Since we started work on this, COVID has radically affected how many organisations deliver work in the sector, with working from home bringing new challenges for inducting new staff. And this has increased the importance of mentoring and how we use secondments to ensure successful transitions. So this has been added as an additional activity to the original plans with its own working group led by the NDA. We do recognise that due to different organisational and corporate drivers across the wide range of businesses working in the sector, it may not be easy or practical to expect all organisations to agree or implement a common approach in each of these 5 key areas. So each group will capture LFE from both within and outside of the sector to provide insights as to how the sector could progress towards better integrated solutions. For example, under the area of competency frameworks, wouldn't it be so much easier if we had acceptance by different key industry players of an industry accepted competency framework and evaluation without the need for recertification against individual company approaches? The workshop sessions this afternoon will look at what further actions may be required to help make it easier for people to transition into the sector, considering what potential security barriers are there, and looking at how mentoring and secondments can ease transitions through a try before you buy approach, if you like. I do hope this has given you an insight into why we view transferability as so important and the work the NSSG are doing to improve the position. Hopefully, it may even have whetted your appetite to get more involved. If so, please reach out to me or my shadow lead for the theme, Sarah Greystone, either directly or through the NSSG Secretariat. The next session this morning is a panel discussion featuring a range of different people and how they have successfully transferred into the sector. So, thanks for joining us, and I'll now pass back to Sarah to introduce and chair the session.
Hello again, and welcome to today's panel session, My Unusual Journey in Nuclear. As previously mentioned, I'm Sarah Greystone, a nuclear engineer from Jacobs, and also the Nuclear Institute Young Generation Network Shadow Theme Lead for Sector Transferability, working with David Boath, and I'm going to be your host for today's panel session. As part of today's panel session, we will first hear 5 very different journeys of individuals into and within the nuclear sector, following which there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions to the panel. To ask the panel a question, please use the chat function, which is found under the Q&A tab. To type a question, just tap the purple plus button at the bottom of your screen. Also, if you see a question being asked that you are interested in, please use the like or the thumbs up button to vote for this question to be asked. The more likes it has, the more likely it is to be asked in the session. I would also encourage you to start asking questions straight away and not to leave this until the end of the introductions. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to the first of our panellists, Jack Gritt. Over to you, Jack.
Oh, thanks, Sarah, and thanks everyone for inviting me today. So we've been asked to talk about our unusual journeys into nuclear, and I'm sure many of you may know mine, but I'll start at the beginning, which is just say a bit about who I am. So I've worked in various roles in nuclear over 35 years now. Currently one of the executive board members for WiN Global, and obviously until recently was the president of WiN UK, and I now act as a strategic advisor for them on a small panel along with David and Olivia Thompson, just to continue the support within the UK. So I'm not actually working at the moment. I took a year's sabbatical in 2019, which due to 2020 turned into a 2-year sabbatical because I didn't feel like looking for a job last year. It felt very interesting time. So hope everyone's coping. So with WiN Global, I'm leading the awards committee and working on the finance committee, developing strategies to try and, grow our presence and continue the gender balance conversation within our industry. But my unusual journey, I guess, was that I started life as a Saturday girl as a hairdresser, and then briefly started an apprenticeship doing that. And whilst doing my A-levels, thought I'd become a beauty therapist, so I took exams to do that, and I ran my own business in Gloucester, where I still live in that area. And I came to nuclear just by chance because Berkeley Power Station is 5 minutes down the road from me. They were advertising a job for a general duties assistant, which I thought was sort of admin. popped along in my little Dotty P suit for the interview, only to find out that a general duties assistant is a posh name for a labourer in the nuclear industry. So, and I think they thought a man was coming along because my name's Jack. Back then, we didn't have to tick boxes about our gender. So I said, well, I can do that anyway. I'll go home and get my overalls on and my Wellingtons, and I'll come back and do the interview. And they laughed, and we did the interview, and I got the job. And it was only a 3-month temporary contract. But for me, what happened was I landed there and it was like an epiphany. I just fell in love with what I saw in front of me, with the potential, with the opportunity. I didn't know anything about engineering or nuclear power. I couldn't believe it. I was, and in some ways, actually being a labourer, you get to crawl all over every aspect of the plant. You know, I was in the waste facilities because I was moving drums about with a forklift truck, and I was driving a Land Rover picking up asbestos waste. I moved to a change room attendant, so I was helping with boiler entries, duct entries as a safety person, dressing people and popping them in to do their work. So I got to be crawling around the plant and understanding it so well. So then I decided to further my education because I thought I know now what I want to do, and I need some qualifications to do that. So I did a physics and chemistry HNC whilst still working part-time. It was the CEGB back in those days, and they called it the Educational Incentive Scheme, and they sponsored me to do that. And then when I finished that, I decided that wasn't good enough. I thought I'd best get a degree. So I thought pure maths, that's easy. Let's do that, a pure maths degree. So I went back to university to do a pure maths degree, and I was having my family at that time, 3 children, 3 lovely children that I've got, Emily, Charlotte and George. So I combined maternity leave with full-time study, which was challenging at times. But I still felt like it was an opportunity, you know, that maybe some other people wouldn't have been given to do that. And so this whole idea of transferability in our industry really interests me, because what I found over my 35 years is I feel like we make it quite hard to come into our industry. You know, the first thing we do is survey a CV and say, have you got the, the qualifications? Have you got years of steeped history in nuclear? Lots of barriers that seem to be there, rather than saying, well, what can this person bring to the game? And actually, it sort of ties in with panel yesterday talking about our strengths, you know, and we should be looking at what strengths individuals have to bring to our industry, rather than saying, where did they work before? Have they worked in nuclear? Do they have the right qualifications? I mean, obviously, there are certain jobs you need certain qualifications for. I'm not going to go and be a mechanical engineer because I didn't train to be one. But there's lots of other positions within our industry where I think we don't need to be so stringent. You know, we don't need to put those barriers in the way for us getting in. And I try very hard when I'm talking to people to understand, or when I'm recruiting, to understand what is their difference. And so then this ties into the whole idea of diversity as well. You know, it's the gender balance that WiN UK are working so hard towards is about bringing diversity into the industry. But diversity doesn't stop with gender. You know, it's diversity of thought, cognitive diversity, industry diversity, experiential diversity. And I just really feel like to make our industry dynamic, thriving, and the best it can be, we should be looking across all of those elements of diversity and saying, how can we encourage people across to our industry? And I mean, very interestingly, I was with Magnox for 22 years. And when I left Magnox to join Jacobs, I tell you, I was terrified. I was really quite terrified. It felt like I felt like I'd been institutionalized by being at Magnox for so long. And I wasn't sure that my skills would be transferable. I thought, well, you know, I've learned a certain way within Magnox. There's a certain way that we work. There are a set of procedures. Will I know and understand enough about the big wide world out there? So it felt terrifying. But actually, when I landed at Jacobs, I needn't have worried at all. It was not terrifying. My skills, my knowledge stood up perfectly well. In some areas, I had more to bring because of my background and experience. In some areas, yeah, sure, I had some gaps, and people helped me to fill those gaps in the spirit of, you know, teamwork and learning. So I think there's something there about, if you're thinking about jumping to another industry, do it. Don't be afraid. If we're in the industry and looking for new people, let's not look at all the old paradigms of what a nuke passport looks like, you know, what a person who has to work in nuclear looks like. I think it's just more important that we keep everything broad and look at people's strengths and what they can bring. I mean, one question I have is, if Steve Jobs or Richard Branson, or it's one of these great entrepreneurs, said they were going to come and work in our industry to help us thrive, would we turn them down because they're not a nuke? We bite their hand off. We go, yeah, great, come and have a look. Or insert any other person that you recognise and respect as a great entrepreneur, you know. So whoever it is, we would grab that chance. So why aren't we doing it now? So I think that's, I don't know where I'm at with time, Sarah. I could go on forever, and I don't want to overstay my welcome.
Cheers, Jack. That was a really great introduction, and you hit on quite a lot of points there that hopefully we'll be able to bring out in some of the discussion towards the end of the session, especially around about, you know, what can people bring to the game, and making sure that, you know, we look at people's CVs for what they can bring to the game rather than what have they not got.
Yeah, and actually just one tiny thing, so I know you need to move on, which I asked myself, who is the audience watching this? You know, it's probably a lot of people that are already in nuclear, and probably not a lot of people who are involved in recruitment. So why should it matter to the people listening and watching? Well, I think that's because we all play a part. We can all change the culture, even if we are not perceived as being directly involved in recruitment. You know, let's just start having conversations, you know, so anyone listening, go out and have a conversation with your company, with your teams, about how you can introduce that diversity. I think that's sort of quite important, and I'll stop there and thank you.
Cheers, Jack. Smashing. Okay, so now we're going to move on to hear from David Morton. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a very interesting story, Jack. So I guess I'm living proof that it's never too late to change a career path. I started in the oil and gas industry in 1975 when I left Glasgow University with a mechanical engineering degree, and I stayed there in that industry until the middle of 2019 when I joined Sellafield PPP. I started as a design engineer, and I worked my way through into managing large portfolios of business in engineering, construction and maintenance with multiple international oil and gas companies. Rather like David before when he started, I was lucky enough to work in many different countries with very different cultures, very different approaches, and it taught me a heck of a lot. So I spent time in France, Canada, Singapore, Indonesia, the Philippines, North Africa, in Algeria, Norway, in addition to the North Sea sector. And for my money, I think success in all those places, including the North Sea, actually required a pretty collaborative approach and a very open mind, which luckily I think is kind of my nature anyway. So I think it kind of fitted me. So I now work for Jacobs, heading up their interests in Sellafield PPP. And that's one of the largest, I would say, and greatest partnerships that's being built right now in the whole of the UK, if not the whole of Europe. It's a fantastic scheme, and I'd say it's a great place to be and great to be part of it. So I would say that my transition to nuclear happened completely by accident. based on some recognised successes somewhere along the line in working in diverse cultures and doing different things. If I was asked to compare the two or talk about the differences between the two industries, I actually think there are huge similarities rather than differences, but there are different approaches that different industries take. And I think that's where people like us from different places can add some real value. I wonder if any of you have heard of a chap by the name of Cliff Young. He was an Australian sheep farmer. There is this race in Australia. It's an endurance race run between Melbourne and Sydney. It's 543 miles. People come from all over to run this race. And Cliff turned up in 1983 to run this race in his farmer's work boots and a pair of farmer's overalls. And not many people thought that he would actually reach the starting line, never mind the finishing line. And this race was run over 5 days. It took that long to actually make that distance by foot. And all the experts knew that the only way to get close to winning this race was to run for 18 hours and sleep for 6 each day. Well, Cliff didn't know that. Nobody told him. So he just kept running. He ran the full 5 days without any sleep. And he set a new record and won outright. And for me, that's the essence of what we can add coming from different places. We have different paradigms in our minds, different concepts, different ways of doing things. And just taking a different approach can dispel what are regarded as truths in the nuclear industry. And that's where I think we can really make a huge difference. So my message today is, Sellafield have opened the door to making massive change in what they're doing in their decommissioning program. We are just at the start of making that happen right now and starting to accelerate the program. So if you are in any way interested, please come help us. And if you hear nothing else today, that's my message.
Cheers, David. Thank you for that. I found it interesting that we've only heard from 2 panelists so far, and they've both used the term that they've fallen into the nuclear industry by accident. That's something I can definitely relate to, as I would also say I fell into the nuclear industry by accident. So yeah, there's something to be said about that term, I think, as we go through. So next we're going to hear from Jim. Now, unfortunately, you can't see Jim's smiley face today because he is unfortunately security requirements at where he works won't allow him to have his video on. But Jim is here, so over to you, Jim.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, Sarah says, my name is Jim Cochran. I work for the Ministry of Defence. So that's why, unfortunately, I can't have my camera on today. It's a security issue. But my job, I work at the Rosyth site, which is about 30 miles east of Edinburgh. My job is to deliver a safe, environmentally responsible and cost-effective solution to dismantle 27 nuclear-powered submarines. That's after they've left operational service. So when I talk about my job, I tell everybody that I am in charge of the biggest submarine fleet in the Royal Navy. So I've got 27 of the nuclear-powered submarines. None of them work because they've all had their fuel taken out, but they're still there. There's 7 at Rosyth and 7 at and 20 eventually will be down at the Devonport site near Plymouth. So the submarines are powered by nuclear reactors. So basically, when the nuclear reactors stop operating, they then laid up safely and securely. So, and then what the job is that I'm in charge of is basically removing radioactive substances. But that's part of the job. I think for me, the emphasis is that this is about recycling, and this is about the waste management hierarchy. Eventually, what we need to do is remove the radioactive substances, but so as it can recycle the submarine. And I'll come back to that later. It's about transferability again, in terms of, think about things in terms of, this is not about nuclear, this is about recycling. So my journey, so I started work when I was 13. I sold milk from the back of an electric powered cart, and it was the most physical job I've ever done because I had to run fast to keep up with the cart. But it was also good and it helped me in my football training. So I went to university, I got a chemistry degree, and then the first job after I left it was working in a laboratory, and I was analysing samples of sheep dip. This was something that farmers dosed their sheep with to remove the ticks. It was a brilliant life lesson because I quickly realised I actually hated that job, and I had absolutely no interest in analytical chemistry. It just didn't float my boat at all. But it also gave me the kick up the backside to apply for other jobs I thought would interest me, not just for any old job that had the title chemist in it. So in 1985, I applied and got a job with what was called British Nuclear Fuels at that time, working at the Sellafield site in West Cumbria. I always had an interest in radiation chemistry, and I understood the difference between a proton, a neutron, and an electron. So I graduated, so I started as a graduate trainee in 1985, and I stayed in the halls of residence there with 100 other people. But that introduced me to some great new friends who remain friends to this day, which is something I'm personally proud of. My job there was to test the storage containers that contained plutonium that had been recovered during the fuel reprocessing process. So this was the only time in the career I can honestly say I was escorted by 3 security staff as we moved the plutonium from the store to the testing facility I was in charge of. I absolutely loved this job, and the only reason I left is I returned to Glasgow, where I came from, to get married. So I then joined a consultancy that provided technical support to the Ministry of Defence, and my job was to run a chemistry model. And the information from the chemistry model, I used to have to then do live feeds into the captains of the operating nuclear submarines at that time to explain to them what was happening in the steam generators and what the build-up of corrosion product was. So then at that time, I said, right, okay, what do I do? Now, in 1992, I decided I was going to do an MBA. There was a lot of, it seemed to be the ticket to success at that time. So I left work for a year and crammed in an MBA in 1 year. And this time going back to university, it wasn't any fun. And I also had to pay for the MBA. So I studied hard, and this time didn't play as hard as I did the first time around. And it's another life skill. You know, if you do work hard, you will eventually get rewarded. That's something I've learned as well. So then I left university and thought, okay, what's next? So what next for me was I decided to join an environmental consultancy based down in Newcastle upon Tyne. And what that company then got, no idea how, I can't even remember, but eventually I ended up on an 18-month contract out in Malaysia, advising the Malaysian government on how they would implement domestic and municipal waste management services covering the north region of Malaysia. So I had to produce a strategic master plan, probably similar to the NDA strategy for you've got just now, to how to manage and operate landfills, transfer stations, composting stations. So this was another brilliant skill for me. It was completely different to anything I'd ever done before. Didn't really know that much about waste management, but again, got involved. I, talked to people. But the brilliant thing about it was a new culture and a completely different way of working. And for example, I worked with a chap who I knew him as Tunku, which I thought was his name. But it turned out that actually Tunku, he was a member of the Malay royal family, and Tunku was a title called Prince. He was a great guy. He was always dressed in jeans and he smoked like a chimney. So I came back from the UK and I joined the Scottish Environment Protection Agency. So I moved back into not nuclear, but regulation. And here's another valuable life lesson. I knew very little about nuclear regulations or what SEPA did. So I spent ages before the interview reading up on questions that I thought I'd get asked at the interview. And you know what? They asked those questions, which again, transferable life lesson. If you're moving into a new area, learn as much as you can about that area before you move, because it makes a job and the interview so much easier. I worked in SEPA for 18 years, and then moved from there into working for the Ministry of Defence. So I've moved from nuclear, moved out of nuclear, and now into defence. And I think what I've learned each job has given me the experience and the challenges to deal with, everything I'm going on. So in terms of skills, transferability, I mean, I echo what Jack said and what others are saying, stop calling it a nuclear post. That puts so many people off. If you use the word nuclear, some of the best people I've worked with come from other industries. My deputy at the moment worked for Ericsson, the phone company. He's a brilliant project manager, knows far more than me about radioactive waste management and how to get submarine dismantling done. But he understands, that good project management is good project management. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. So look at transferable skills. Don't reject people because they're not chartered this. And I'm a chartered chemist, but I don't use that as evidence against me. The oil and gas market for me is the next big decommissioning market. And there is transferable skills from there into the nuclear. In terms of putting in place, again, people have mentioned diversity, inclusion policies. Sell those to potential employees. The COVID arrangements are different now. I'm never going to be working 5 days again. I know that, and I'm not going to be working 5 days in an office. So have a think about these things. Offer flexible working. And the other thing I do is a thing that I really am poor at, but LinkedIn, social media, use it for recruitment, but also use it to listen to what people want, because that's where the people who are looking for new careers, looking for opportunities, they're out there. And as I agree with Jack says, look at the opportunities you can use to bring those people in. And so I'll leave it as there. My advice is, if you're a recruitment person, stop putting nuclear post at the top of the advert. Start putting in post what people you want and get the best candidates out there. So Sarah, that's me. I'll hand you back to you.
Cheers, Jim. Thanks for that. Yeah, I found it really interesting that you were saying just having that singular word in a job title, the word nuclear, how that can instantly just turn somebody off like that and think, no, there's no chance I'm going to get that job, or I don't know anything about that. Why bother applying? So that's something we really need to look at is why is that just like one word really putting people off applying for those sorts of posts? Or like you said, maybe we can look at the way we advertise posts and do something a little bit differently to increase transferability in the sector.
Yeah.
Cool. Smashing. So we're on to our next panelist, which is Emily. So over to you, Emily.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Emily Ball. I currently work at Hartlepool Nuclear Power Station. My career journey is quite short in comparison to everybody else's. I'm 20 years old and I started working for EDF Energy when I was 16. So I moved straight from school. My coordinators who did the recruiting came into my school and sort of pitched us this apprenticeship, telling us all about where we're going to go for our training. We went down to Portsmouth for 2 years and then came back onto site for 2 years, visiting our sites in between to sort of get a feel for the environment in the industry. But I'd originally applied for Cochran coal-fired power station in Retford in Nottinghamshire. So that's where I started, but it'd been running for 50 years or so, and was about to move into the decommissioning phase. It decommissioned in September 2019. So before then, I was coming to the end of my 2 years down in Portsmouth doing my training. On this training, one thing that I found quite funny, and it'll kind of link in with the fact that I also think I sort of landed in nuclear by accident, is that we were all receiving the same training. So we had coal, gas, renewable apprentices. There was 3 of us in the year, and then about 45 nuclear apprentices, and we all had to learn about coal power stations, gas power stations, as well as nuclear. But we were kind of sat there thinking, when are we going to use this information? When are we going to use this nuclear information? Because we work on a coal site. But when it came to it, they were looking at career longevity for us. So when the coal power station started closing, they thought, what can we do to put these apprentices in the best situation we can? So Cotton Power Station as a whole started this thing called the People Hub, where you would go in. It was just an old room they'd sort of set aside for it. You go in, and what they'd done is on the walls they had career opportunities in the area, businesses that you might want to get involved in, as well as all of the nuclear power stations. And they were very, very encouraging in the sense of, you can all do this. The thing with EDF, especially when we transferred in between power stations within EDF, is that they provide you with the training that you need. So you've got your technical training, your team leaders and your peers know that you can do the work, and any nuclear knowledge that you need, they sort of top you up. We'd already got this prior training around the operation of nuclear power stations, so it was really a case of you've already set up to do that. We'll just facilitate the move and sort of help you get there. And the skills that you learn, mainly it's your trade, and that's what transferability sort of meant to us. Is your job is your trade. It's less nuclear, more control and instrumentation. That's what I'm doing now, and anything else, your mates will pick you up, your peers will pick you up and sort of hand you the rest. So that it was quite simple for me, really. That's more or less it. But it was the company was very supportive in terms of making sure that they told the staff and encouraged the staff, you can move into this sector, and it's not closed off just because you haven't had nuclear experience in the past. That's something that they can provide you with. So that would be my main sort of takeaway.
Cheers, Emily. Thanks for that. Yeah, I thought that was really good that they opened everyone's eyes to the fact that you've got these skills. They are transferable. Just because you've not spent your entire time in that industry doesn't mean that those skills aren't relevant. So that's really good that they actually sort of did that for you, because I think otherwise people might not have realised that so much. So that was brilliant.
Yeah, definitely.
Smashing. Okay, and then on to our last panelist, which is Kieran. Over to you, Kieran.
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me today. So I'm Kieran. I'm the Early Careers Advisor at the National Nuclear Laboratory. So I've been here for a year and 2 months now, and I help support all of our early careers schemes at NNL, which is the graduate scheme, apprenticeship scheme and postdoctorate scheme, and supporting all members of our early careers community through their initial stages of their career. So my journey is very unusual in how I got into nuclear. So when I left school, my first career was as a professional rugby league player. So for 5 years, I was a full-time professional rugby player. My first club was a club called Salford City Reds, now known as Salford Red Devils. And I think what Salford did fantastically well with us was we was put with the first team straight away. So if the first team trained, we trained with them. If the first team ate, we ate with them. Whatever they did, if they went to public appearances, we went with them. And that really provided me with a good understanding of how to behave as a professional, but also how to conduct yourself in public with people. And they also had us doing the usual sporting apprenticeship things, such as cleaning boots and cleaning the coaches' cars and cleaning the stands after games and things like that. And I feel it really provided me with a good grounding. What I learned really early was never be afraid to ask for advice. So on a daily basis, I was mixing with people who had literally grown up idolising. So I started playing rugby at a tender age of 5 years of age. So I was sat in change room with people like Martin Afire, who is really high up in the public. So going up to people like that and asking for advice and then receiving that advice really it opened so many doors for me, and it set me up with a lot of skills in the future. So I was a full-time athlete for 5 years, and then I progressed into part-time rugby league for 3.5 years. And as as I went into part-time rugby, that's when I began to work as well. So basically it was working in the day and training and playing in the evenings and weekends. And that's when I began to work in a young offenders unit, working to rehabilitate and prepare young inmates for release. And that's when I got a real insight into, first of all, what a day's work is all about. So it was a shock to my system at first, I'll be honest, because my day's work would start at 10:30 in the morning and I'd be finished at 1 o'clock at training. So doing a full day's work was quite a shock at first, but it gave me a real insight into what goes into supporting people, and it provided me with an understanding of patience that's needed when working in such environments. Whilst I was working the inmates that I was working with, a high population of them had learning disabilities. So I was able to get a real good understanding of disability awareness. And that really kind of sparked an interest with myself. And that helped support me in my next career move, which was working for my local council in Wigan, with a service called Supported Employment Service. And at that service, that's when I was working with people with cross-range disabilities and supporting them into employment. So I wasn't just sat in an office supporting people and applying for jobs with them. I was actually working alongside them. So I was seen in many different businesses across the Wigan Borough, supporting people at Asda, Aldi, in garages. I was a bin man for a couple of months, working on building sites, working in offices. So I felt so lucky that I was getting to experience all these different industries, whilst at the same time I was supporting these magnificent people at the initial stages of their careers. Whilst I was at Supported Employment Service, I was able to gain an understanding of apprenticeships, and that really did spark an interest with myself. And my next career move was working at St Helens Chamber of Commerce, and that's when I was supporting the apprenticeship scheme and traineeship scheme that they had available there. Part of that as well was being an employability tutor. So that was a fantastic journey for myself, because I was able to understand what people actually need, what their requirements are, and what they were missing to help them gain that employment. So bridging that gap was such a rewarding experience for myself, but also I got to gain a real good understanding of the apprenticeship structure, as well as how important traineeships can be, and the value of work experience also. Before I arrived at NNL, for 3 years, I was head of student services at a college. So it was a music and creative arts college. And that was a fantastic time in my career, because I got to work with so many different gifted individuals in many different aspects. And I was able to gain an insight into an industry, which is music, which I was very limited in. And working with bands, one in particular who's doing really well at the moment, a band called the Lathams. So we was there at the initial stages, putting them together and helping them with what a career could be like in the music industry. When I was at the college as well, I was doing a lot of one-to-one coaching, and that's when I couldn't help but reflect back on my rugby career, where I was individually coached as well as coached as a team, and those skills that I gained during that time have really helped me throughout my career. I feel I think career coaching is a vital aspect in any industry, and being seen as an individual. I think we all have our own needs and our own barriers that we need to overcome, and I really feel that individual coaching aspect is vital, no matter what career path we go on to. When I came into the nuclear industry, again, like most people on this panel, I kind of fell into the industry. To me, the nuclear industry was way over my head. But when I began to research NNL and the nuclear industry, it really just gripped me, and it was something that I knew I definitely wanted to be part of. When I first joined the nuclear industry, I really felt I was in over my head. But now it's just such an amazing industry to be part of. And what I find most rewarding about my role here is that I get to see that full journey now, where previously I'd give people that initial stages of their career journey, but I never got to see the end point. Where at NNL, I really do get to see that start and end point to people's career journeys now. So I couldn't be happier.
Smashing. Cheers, Kieran. I think it's really interesting, obviously, with your role within NNL, because a lot of people think that the nuclear industry is just full of engineers and physicists, and actually, we actually need a lot greater amount of skills out there, like people such as yourselves doing the career management side of things, HR, project managers, and some people just don't see it. There's this preconception about the industry that we're all a bunch of physicists, basically. So it's great to have you on the panel today. Okay, that's all of our panelists have introduced themselves. So I'm now going to open up the floor to some questions. So thanks to everyone who's posted their questions so far and who's also used the like button to vote. So the question that's coming up the top of the poll at the minute is all about that term that we've heard so many times. I think 4 out of 5 people on the panel have said it, which is that they fell into the nuclear industry by accident. And the question is many of you have talked about that, falling into the industry by accident. How can we target people outside of our sector so that they make that conscious decision to join rather than it being this something that we just do by accident? I'll go to you first, Jack.
Yeah, well, first of all, don't say accident. We fall into it by chance. We don't like using the word accident in our industry.
That was
my attempt at humour. I think there's a big thing about myth busting so that people understand our industry. And actually, very interestingly, Sarah Long of Atkins did a net zero talk yesterday, and she's put on LinkedIn a myth buster that she developed, and it says, it's not expensive, it is very safe, it is green, and so that's worth going and checking out on LinkedIn. So I think all of us within the industry, the more we can have positive conversations to lift up our industry, because sadly, due to things like Chernobyl and Fukushima, people have a fear of nuclear. I mean, that's borne out by statistics. So we have a great job of communicating. Number one, this is a great industry, it's a safe industry, and it's an industry of opportunity. So, and I think we can all play a part in that. So that's kind of number one. And number two is something that WiN UK and all the wonderful team there are onto, which is talking to schools. I mean, who talked to you at school about nuclear? Well, even engineering, full stop, let alone nuclear. The teachers don't really understand these options. Some do, but not all. And so children aren't encouraged or informed about it. So they don't we did a little bit of a straw poll, so I'm not going to say it's the best statistic in the world, but when we were doing some work with schools and with the Small Peace Trust, we asked the children who were interested in engineering why they were interested, and nearly all of them said one of their parents was an engineer. So, if your parents weren't an engineer, the information isn't out there. So, WiN look at working with schools, working with universities, but also as an industry, we just need to get better communication out there, I think. And I'll end there, otherwise I'll keep going on because it would be interesting to see what others think about that.
Cheers, Jack. Has anybody got anything else they would like to add to Jack? Go on, David.
I can add to that a bit. There's probably two things. I think Jack hit on one of them first of all, and that's the safety aspect. The nuclear industry does have that image in the public domain which smacks of a certain element of not being the best way of generating power, for example. And just before I joined Sellafield PPP, I was listening to a researcher in Oxford University, and it was a Hannah Ritchie, I think her name was, and she was on Radio 4, and she'd run the numbers on the safety statistics projected out of producing electrical power in different ways. So she'd basically said if you produced all the electrical power around the world by one means, say brown coal, how many deaths would there be? And including direct impacts of accidents, the indirects would amount to, she'd calculated, something like 5 million deaths from brown coal per year. Black coal was 4 million, natural gas was 3, bioproducts, biomass, I think was 500,000, and nuclear was 10,000. So that's not what you hear in the public domain. So I think there's a message there that could be turned around for sure. And the second thing is the razzmatazz. There's a lot more razzmatazz about the oil and gas industry, for example, than there is about nuclear. And there's maybe something that could be done there too, to just advertise the industry and what's happening in it on a wider basis. I mean, I confess that when I was working through my career, I really didn't think about the nuclear industry, and I didn't see much about it in the public domain to attract me to it. So I think there's something there too.
Thanks, David. Would anybody else like to add anything to that before we move on? No? Okay, smashing. So the next question that that has come up on the poll is about transferable experiences or the skills that you've had from the other industries that you've worked in. So which ones do you think have been the most helpful or the most useful when you've transferred over into your role within nuclear? Because often we think that, you know, it's those technical skills, but sometimes it can actually be those softer skills that that actually are the most helpful. I don't know if you want to lead with this one, Kieran. You're doing some nodding.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I think personally it's been communication. I really feel that the networking aspect of what I've done throughout my career has really helped. And I've got sport to thank so much for that. It gave me a real good understanding of what it's like to work in a team, but also working with people from many different backgrounds as well. When you reach that professional aspect of being a sportsman or sportswoman, you get to work with people from all over the world. So it really did kind of introduce that to me from a very early start in my career. So yeah, I feel communication really did help me from those initial stages of when I first left school through to what I'm doing now. I still use the same types of techniques, you know, and I think body language is a big part of that as well, especially when working in early careers. Approachability is everything. So yeah, that's one thing I've carried through personally through my career.
Cheers, thanks, Kieran. Jim, I don't know if you've got anything to add. You've had quite a varied career, spanning, you know, both out of nuclear, into nuclear, out of nuclear, back in again. So, you know, you've obviously transferred your skills over numerous times. Have you got anything there?
Yeah, I'd say, Sarah, I mean, I did a qualification in project management and Prince 2, I was called at that thing kind of thing. But for me, what I learned was that, you know, 90% of good decisions are made through common sense, and the other 10% is by gut instinct. And I've relied on that so much throughout my whole career. As I said, you know, the guy I work with is a brilliant project manager. So where I kind of like come from is, you know, that's a transferable skill. If you understand, you know, and as Kieran said there, if you can communicate your ideas, and if you can write them down in a structured way that kind of communicate to people, this is the direction, this is what we need to do. If you've got a schedule and you can explain how the work, bring people along with it. That's not something I learned just in nuclear. I learned it in nuclear, but I learned it in all the other industries that I've been in as well. That if you can write things down, if you can explain and communicate to people what you need to do, how you need to do it, and then if you can put all that down in a kind of structured way and get people to buy into it, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, Sarah. That is just practical, common sense, and then, you know, people buy into your idea. People, I mean, I've been lucky that I had a good mentor when I was younger. That's what I'm trying to do now in terms of like offer up, you know, the kind of things that I've learned. So that's what, when people come to me and say, Jim, what do you need to do? I'd say, think about what you need to do, write it all down, document it, look at your plan, and then bring people along with it. Stakeholder engagement, you know, Kieran mentioned it as well. So for me, that's transferable. And it's not just transferable nuclear, that's transferable to any industry, supermarket, retail, you know, that's why I think, you know, that I go back to what I said, you know, that's not a nuclear skill, that's a skill, you know, and that's a transferable skill across any industry.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think sometimes, you know, when we're writing job descriptions, you know, the first thing that always is there, bam, at the top is, have you got a degree? Have you got, you know, all the sort of qualifications? Whereas actually, sometimes in many of the roles, it's those skills that we've just talked about there that really matter, and the ones that are really transferable from other industries. And, you know, so maybe they should be at the top of job descriptions. They should be the first things that we're looking out for. And the have you got a degree? Have you know, got so many years in experience? They're secondary, really, to what we actually need for that person to be able to function in that role.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Sarah, there's a really interesting Emily Hutchinson of Apply Psychology. She's an occupational psychologist, and she applies this strength-based approach to organisations. And she worked with Atkins, and they wrote some job descriptions that completely, you know, were completely different to anything that had ever been used before. So, like you say, it didn't talk about a role and what has stereotypically been that role for all this time. It talked about strengths. To come and do this job, we need you to have this, and this. And it's about, I don't know, she talks about trying to squash people into the wrong shape, you know. So you hear round peg, square hole all the time, but I mean, it's more than that. We're not round and we're not square. We can be bubble-like, we can be triangular, we can be a random shape, but one way or another, we have to find that right fit. And so I found that really powerful about looking at how we describe our needs for our business that are not in those standard terms, which is really just supporting what Jim has just said. It's just reiterating that. So
I would just add, it's not about being smarter. It's about knowing different stuff, having come from different places, and having the confidence to express those. And that's kind of it. You know, I've always found if you can create some kind of compelling vision and then involve people in developing a strategy to attain that and develop the actions to thrash it out, then you'll get the commitment happening naturally. And you know, people will work through diversity to make it happen, you know, through difficult times. So it's not, as you say, it's not just the technical expertise, it's all the just encompassing, harnessing the power of a large team and pulling or pushing it in the one direction.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Okay, so I'll just move on to the next question that's come up quite high on the list, and that's all around to do with the culture that we have within nuclear, and the preconceptions people might have about moving into the nuclear industry. Because, like we said, we've used this word, there's quite a lot of myths surrounding it. The word nuclear, just in itself in a job title, can turn people off. So there's this thing around what our culture is in nuclear. You know, is it a bunch of us walking around in lab coats, that sort of thing? You know, people have these preconceptions. So people are asking, you know, what were your preconceptions about joining the nuclear industry? What did you think the culture would be like? And was that actually true when you got here? So, Emily, if I come to you first, because obviously you went into a room, there was lots of job specifications all around a wall, and you decided to go for nuclear. Did you have anything that was in the back of your head thinking, oh, is it going to be a bit like this?
It was a bit weird, really, because I'd been learning with all of the nuclear apprentices for a year or so already. So I'd heard little bits about the nuclear industry itself, but I had no experience at all. And I kind of thought, ooh, is it going to be completely different? I just expected it to be massively complicated and completely different. But in reality, it's just a different system. The only difference was how we generated heat in terms of a power station. And yeah, in terms of what the culture was like, it was very positive, and everybody was very helpful and understanding, because a lot of people were going through the same thing at the same time, and they sort of expected you to they sort of expected you to not really know what it was all about. So they're just very supportive overall. Yeah, that's all I would say.
Cool. So, well, I think Sarah's dropped off for a second. So, I would just add to that, Emily, that my perception of the nuclear industry when I was thinking about it was that it was in the doldrums, and I found myself realizing that was completely wrong. There's so much happening in the nuclear industry right now; it's unbelievable. But I just hadn't seen it. I hadn't heard of it, and I found that startling. And I think the most difficult thing I found in the transition was the acronyms. And, the number that there are, and actually trying to make sense of them and trying to retain them. And I'm still discovering new ones 2 years on.
I forgot about those.
Yeah, we like to call them TLAs.
Yeah.
3-letter acronyms.
Yeah. But again, there are just so many similarities. It's safety and environmental are paramount, just like oil and gas and many other industries. It's trying to mobilize large teams to get them work cohesively together. It's trying to fix down the functional specification so that it doesn't drift during the process of the project. It's controlling the scope so that it doesn't grow arms and legs and cost and all the rest of it. It's getting construction and maintenance involved right up front in the engineering processes. It's mobilizing the supply chain effectively. It's logistics of moving massive amounts of plant equipment and people around the countryside. It's controlling the cost and schedule. It's market cost escalation. All the same things.
Yeah, I agree, David. I mean, the question of what was my perception, there was none, because I didn't even know it existed. I just landed and that was it. But I do, there are perceptions out there one way or another that it's particularly a dying industry. I know that when we were trying to recruit graduates, we were struggling, and when asked why, because all the Magnox fleet were closing, and then the AGR fleet wasn't going to be far behind, and the new build program hadn't materialized or kicked off. People very much saw it as not having a long-term opportunity for them, and it just, as you said, it just could not be further from the truth. The decommissioning programs have got a long time to run, and so much scope for innovation and exciting things that you can do within decommissioning. And then we do still have lots of operational sites, and of course new build is on it. Well, it's here with Hinkley C, and it's on its way in other areas. And I just think, wow, it's a really exciting time for our industry. We've got the potential for SMRs. I know it rumbles on a bit, but there's just so many opportunities. And so what do we have to do? We've got to get a better message out there, which I guess is what the NSSG and WiN and lots of other people are trying to do, is really get that message out to the people of the UK that this is an exciting, vibrant, long-term career option for people. And transferable skills, which are transferable? All of them. Every skill is a skill that we require in our industry. So there's nothing that isn't transferable. We need lawyers, project managers, project controls, engineers, cleaners, admin people, cooks, chefs. I mean, you name it, we need it in our industry. So
yeah, and ironically, actually, the 20-year program at Sellafield that we're involved in PPP, it's all about building new structures. It's building new facilities. It's not about taking things apart at all. There's a complete opposite to oil and gas, where it's all about taking it. Decommissioning is taking things out. This is completely the opposite. So,
well, clearly you guys don't need a panel host. Sarah, unfortunately, has had to drop out, but you can carry on the conversation without her. But I have got one more question that I'd like to pose to you, and then we'll just close down with perhaps some closing statements or thoughts from everyone here. So yeah, in hearing your stories today, you've actually all taken a whole range of different forks and turns on your journey, and yet when we talk to young people or students or children, we ask the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? So I'm just wondering whether you've got any advice around for, if you imagine your kind of 10-year-old self, what advice might you give yourself in terms of skills and techniques that you might pick up along a journey rather than a designated career path that might help your journey? So Kieran, do you want to start off on that one?
Yes, no problem. I think if I was to talk to myself at 10 years of age, I think it would just be try everything. One thing that I do feel is fantastic about the nuclear industry is the opportunities that's there. There's such a wide range of opportunities that you can be part of and different avenues you can go down. And it would be try and take something from everything that you do. Try and realize what you are gaining from that, whether it's partaking in an event or a qualification or something that you're studying. Is try and see what you can take from that and carry it with you, because you really do never know when you're going to need it in your career. One thing that I feel has been amazing since I've joined the nuclear industry is just how valued your experience is. I didn't have the strongest academic background, and that did provide me with a lot of anxieties before I arrived at NNL. But that has not even been an issue. Everybody who I've met has been so interested in what I could bring to NNL. It really is like a family. You have the people who reach out to you, heads of capabilities, engineers, mechanics, people just contacting, just introducing themselves. It's just been absolutely overwhelming for myself. So, I would tell any young person that the industry is such a welcoming industry, and it really is the land of opportunity as well. That's
great. Thanks, Kieran. I noticed, Jim, you've got your hand up. What would you like to add?
Yeah, I'd comment. I think I said it now. If it interests you and in your personal life, it will probably interest you in your career as well. I did I did chemistry, but I did environmental chemistry for like 3 months, and I absolutely loved it. But I didn't really go into that to start off with. It was only kind of like later when I got a job working for an environmental consultancy that I suddenly realised, because I read up about it, but I also did all the things that everybody did. I was climate change before climate change was there, sustainability before it was all there. I go around turning off light bulbs in the house, turn down the thermostat. So, I do practice what I preach. But because I do that, when I go into work, I actually enjoy doing all that. And where I am just now in my career, when somebody asks me, what job do you do? You can see it's nuclear decommissioning. But I say I'm in charge of one of the biggest environmental cleanup projects in the UK, because my job is to recycle, nuclear submarines. So once the radioactive waste is off, it's a recycling project. So that's the kind of message. It's kind of like that would encourage more people to come in if they thought, that's a really good thing to get involved in, because that's about sustainability, that's about the future. Why? So tell it in that way, in terms of the things that interest people rather than the negative context. When I joined nuclear, it was about bombs. It was Cold War. It was 1984. It was all the negative things. But that image isn't there, and I think if we can latch onto something that puts in a positive image, where this is environmental restoration and cleanup, that's a positive thing rather than nuclear, which is often the connotation of negativity associated with the weapons. So that's, if we can kind of steer it away from there into what interests people in society today, then I think that's what we need to work on. Thanks.
That's great, thanks. And lastly, Jack, do you have any thoughts about career journeys and pathways?
Yeah, well, in terms of what would I say, to my younger self, I think one of the really important things is to grasp opportunities. So, not to have courage, not be fearful. If something comes your way, grab the opportunity, because you don't know where it's going to take you. And it could be like me, it was a temporary job as a labourer. Didn't think that would be my career, and here I am 35 years later. And I think most importantly, which I just looked up because I remembered it whilst the others were talking, I would like to quote Dr. Seuss, of the Cat in the Hat fame, because I think this is very important. And it's you have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own and you know what you know, and you are the one who'll decide where to go. And I think he's just about got it right.
Fantastic, Jack. Thank you. I'm going to hand back to Sarah now to close us off, but thanks very much.
Cheers, Becky. Thanks for jumping in there whilst typically we had internet connection problems at my end. And no amount of pressing the rejoin button would it let me join Teams. Thanks for everyone who's joined us today, and of course a big massive thank you to our 5 panelists. It's been great to hear about your unusual journeys into the nuclear industry, or in some cases into, out of and back in again. And it just really shows that, you know, the skills that you have from your other careers, you know, they are transferable into this industry, and, you know, they are transferable within the industry as well. You can go from civil to defence, defence to civil. It doesn't really matter. It's those skills that you have, those skill sets that you really need to sell and understand yourself, that, you know, transferability is there. And also transferability is key in enabling this industry to survive in the coming years and to meet the demands for skills within this sector. So just another thank you for everyone for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed the panel session, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the Skills Festival. Thank you very much, and goodbye.